if you look at it as 66 books written over a 1,300-year time span by how many different authors, and there's not a single contradiction in there when you actually start looking at the scripture as a whole.
Oh, you know people's going to throw some...
Solomon and David. And the books of wisdom is what they're classified as.
Yeah, the Psalms is more prophetic than it is anything else, because there's so much prophetic chapters that's in the book of Psalms.
But Psalms 2 is interestingly is reflective of the heart of God, which I love the beauty in that we know David was a man after God's own heart. And through the Psalms, which were primarily written by David, they were written by other people as well.
Moses included.
Yeah, so what you see is a reflection of the entirety of human emotion. I've talked about this before. But when you read through Psalms, you experience the human condition. And it's interesting that the primary author was David, the man who was considered.
There was a couple letters from Paul. I want to say it was I feel like it was the Thessalonians letters. I may be wrong on that, but that the early church fathers did not understand what Paul was writing about and did not want to originally include it in the canon scripture. But the thing is there is not a single book in the Bible, not a single verse that contradicts itself.
So that was going to be my question for you. What do you say to because talking about the origins of the Bible and how we got it, what do you say to the people that says it's filled with contradictions?
They're not reading it for what it is. How you read and study the Bible is a mosaic.
Mm-hmm.
So the folks at Answers in Genesis get it wrong because they look specifically at the book of Genesis as an exclusive text on how the world began. They're not looking at the scriptures that are in Isaiah. They're not looking at the scriptures that are in Job. They're not looking at the scriptures that are in Ezekiel. They're not looking at what Jesus said in Matthew at what happened in the foundation of the world.
Mm-hmm.
For anyone who's not a student of the Bible, there's even people who are students of the Bible, there's a strong tendency to cherry pick specific verses to emphasize a belief that you have. And the Bible started to transform me when I stopped looking to read to affirm my beliefs and instead used it to drive my beliefs. And once I started to read the scripture and transform my beliefs to what the truth of the Bible was, I started seeing the Bible in a new light. I started actually reading it for what it was. And I started with the New Testament rather than the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Read through the New Testament, and then I went back and read the Old Testament in its entirety. And I've done this several times. And then I've gone back and I've read a chronological read of the Bible so that it makes sense as you start at the beginning and work your way through. And what I found was that the entire canon of Scripture as we know it consistently points back to Christ. Everything points back to Christ. The entire story, the entire narrative, the entire purpose of everything, the history of the Jews, and how everything they experienced is supposed to be reflective of the redemptive power of God, who was fully manifest through the deity and the presence of Christ in this world. Like that's the essence of our scripture. So when you say, well, the Bible contradicts itself, it's because you're trying to cherry pick one verse and you're not taking it in context of the whole narrative. Because when you read it as an entire narrative, it's the most it is the most sound document ever created, and it was compiled over the course of 1,600 years.
You have entire denominations that base their entire denomination off of those tiny little blurbs of scripture.
You can't do that. I mean,
No.
to build a doctrine requires multiple scriptures to back up your thought. Or to back up what you're trying to obtain. But we often try to build a doctrine around one scripture.
One little tiny
piece. And you
piece.
cannot do that.
Nope.
You can take anything anybody says out of context and make it mean whatever you want. Our shorts, for example, how many times we get comments on our shorts because the short is a short. It's just not a full long form 45-minute to an hour episode. So they'll take one little 15-second chunk out of it and call us false teachers, false prophets, whatever.
Take us out of context.
Where'd that guy go, by the way? Used the scripture and we're not going to fight with people in the comment section. Sorry to interrupt you, but this fires me up. To be called a false prophet and a teacher, or wrong and we're lying and we're just having conversations about ourselves as men around these certain topics, and you quote the scripture back to them, they're gone. They don't
Silence.
show back up.
Right. But that's the
So it's
thing.
nice to meet you, stranger.
Stranger danger.
Come back anytime.
My name's Josh. I'm not aggressive and hostile toward other people.
I was very nice in what I just said.
Go back and see the previous Spotlight series.
But no, it's true. I mean, if it can happen to your Spotlight series that we just did,
Mm-hmm.
and last week's episode, if you probably should go watch it. It's great.
It is a good one.
A short that is pulled out of that can take something out of context, and if they don't watch the whole episode, they're going to see something in there. Don't care what it was you said or didn't say, and they're going to read into it and come up with something that is not factual, not correct. That is what people who try to disprove the Bible do. But if you look at it as 66 books written over a 1,300-year time span by how many different authors, and there's not a single contradiction in there when you actually start looking at the scripture as a whole.
Oh, you know people's going to throw some contradictions there.
Oh, I guarantee it.
I'm kind of looking forward to that.